In 2015, a clean 1999 Honda CBR 900 RR FireBlade struggled to sell for $4,500. Today, that same motorcycle can quietly pull over 12 grand in original condition, and it is not alone. A collector storm is building. The 25-year import rule opened global demand. Riders in their 50s are buying back their youth, clean examples are disappearing, and rising tariffs made older bikes suddenly irresistible. Tonight, we are uncovering 12 90s motorcycles that exploded in value after 2020 and may still be climbing fast. One near the top is becoming almost impossible to afford. Number 12. Suzuki Bandit 1200. Some motorcycles become collectible because they were limited. Others earn legendary status through racing glory or exotic engineering. But the Suzuki Bandit 1200 climbed into the collector world for a far different reason. Riders used them so relentlessly that clean survivors slowly began disappearing from the road. When Suzuki introduced the Bandit during the 90s, it captured the spirit of the old-school muscle bike better than almost anything else on the market. Beneath the tank sat a massive 1,157 cubic centimeter oil-cooled inline. Four descended from the legendary GSXR bloodline. The engine delivered enormous mid-range torque and a deep mechanical punch that made the motorcycle feel brutally strong in everyday riding. There were no complicated electronics softening the experience. Twist the throttle and the Bandit answered with pure analog force. What made the motorcycle so popular, however, also endangered its future collector value. Riders customized them constantly. Many were stretched, stunt-ridden, drag-raced, stripped into street fighters, or simply worn down after decades of hard miles. By the late 2010s, decent Bandit examples could still be purchased surprisingly cheaply, often trading between roughly $3,000 and $4,000. Almost nobody viewed them as future collector machines, but the market changed quickly. By 2026, low-mileage motorcycles with factory exhausts, original paint, stock airboxes, and untouched frames regularly command between $6,500 and $10,000 depending on the condition. Exceptionally preserved examples can climb even higher as collectors scramble to find unmodified survivors. If these are the kinds of motorcycles that make you rethink every bike you ever sold too early, subscribe to the channel. That support is what helps us keep tracking hidden collector trends, disappearing motorcycles, and the bikes quietly turning into real money, while most riders still are not paying attention. Enthusiasts are finally realizing the Bandit represents something modern motorcycles rarely deliver anymore. Huge carbureted torque, mechanical simplicity, and unapologetic character. And the next motorcycle proves that some of the most valuable machines from the 90s were never built to intimidate riders, only to outlast almost everything around them. Number 11. BMW R1100 RS. Some motorcycles spend decades quietly aging in the background before enthusiasts suddenly realize what they nearly overlooked. That is exactly the story of the BMW R1100 RS, a machine whose reputation has grown stronger with every passing year. When BMW introduced the R1100 RS in the early 90s, it represented far more than another long-distance motorcycle. It marked the beginning of BMW's modern sport touring philosophy. Beneath the sleek bodywork sat the new oilhead boxer engine, advanced fuel injection, refined aerodynamics, and BMW's revolutionary telelever front suspension system, which dramatically improved stability during hard braking and highway riding. At the time, the technology felt remarkably advanced. So did the price. New examples often carried showroom prices between roughly $12,000 and $14,500, serious money during the 90s. Yet despite all that engineering sophistication, the R1100Rs never became a poster motorcycle. It lacked the loud aggression of Italian superbikes and avoided the razor-sharp image of Japanese race replicas. Instead, it earned quiet loyalty among experienced riders who valued durability, comfort, and effortless cross-country capability. That understated identity kept values surprisingly low for years. Around 2020, clean examples could still be found between roughly $2,500 and $4,000. Today, low-mileage motorcycles with factory luggage, original paint, and complete service documentation regularly bring far stronger prices as collectors rush to secure untouched survivors. But steady appreciation is one thing. Cult status is another entirely. By the late 1990s, a very different kind of motorcycle began attracting collectors. Stripped-down street fighters with attitude, personality, and unmistakable presence. And in Britain, one machine quietly helped redefine that entire category, leading us straight into the next chapter of this list. Number 10. Triumph Speed Triple. By the middle of the 90s, sport motorcycles were beginning to chase ever more extreme aerodynamics, sharper bodywork, and higher top speeds. But while nearly every manufacturer focused on wrapping motorcycles in more plastic, Triumph moved in the opposite direction. And that decision helped create one of the most influential motorcycles of its entire generation, the Speed Triple. When the first generation Speed Triple arrived in 1994, it did not look like a traditional superbike. Much of the bodywork had disappeared, exposing the engine, frame, and mechanical aggression underneath. The result felt raw, muscular, and unmistakably rebellious. Long before naked performance motorcycles became mainstream, the Speed Triple was already redefining what a modern street machine could be. At the center of the motorcycle sat Triumph's charismatic inline triple engine, delivering a unique personality that blended low-end torque with a strong, high-revving surge. Combined with upright ergonomics and aggressive styling, the motorcycle developed an identity unlike almost anything coming from Japan at the time. When new, most models sold between roughly $8,500 and $10,500. Yet years later, many used examples could still be found for less than $5,000 because buyers overlooked their historical importance. Today, exceptionally clean motorcycles with factory exhaust systems, original paint, and untouched bodywork are becoming increasingly scarce. Values now regularly climb well beyond $10,000 as collectors search for surviving original examples. We have already covered a few motorcycles that went from cheap used rides to serious collector pieces almost overnight. Now we want to hear from you. Did you ever own one of these bikes when nobody cared about them? Leave a comment and tell us your story, because riders who actually lived through the 90s market usually know details and price changes that auction sites never tell you. And the next motorcycle on this countdown reveals what happens when racing-inspired performance becomes so dominant that an entire generation refuses to forget it. Number 9. Kawasaki Ninja ZX9R. For years, the Kawasaki Ninja ZX9R lived in the shadow of motorcycles like the FireBlade and the first-generation R1. But in today's collector market, riders are finally beginning to understand something important. The ZX9R captured the raw spirit of the 90s superbike era almost perfectly. When Kawasaki introduced the motorcycle during the middle of the decade, the mission was clear. Riders wanted enormous speed without sacrificing real-world comfort, and the ZX9R delivered both with frightening confidence. Its inline-4 produced brutal acceleration, while the chassis remained remarkably stable at highway speeds. Long before electronic rider aids softened modern superbikes, this machine demanded skill, focus, and respect from the person behind the handlebars. And visually, it looked exactly like riders remember the 90s. The aggressive ram air styling, oversized fairings, and unmistakable Kawasaki attitude gave the motorcycle a presence that still feels iconic today. Yet despite that reputation, used values remained surprisingly affordable for years. Between 2018 and 2020, clean motorcycles often traded between roughly $3,500 and $5,500 because many buyers still viewed them as aging performance bikes rather than future collectibles. That perception changed rapidly. By 2026, low-mileage examples with factory paint, stock exhaust systems, and original bodywork regularly command between $8,000 and $14,000. Truly untouched motorcycles have become increasingly difficult to locate after decades of racing, crashes, stunt riding, and heavy modification. Collectors now inspect frame alignment, carburetors, cam chain tensioners, and fairing integrity carefully because many surviving motorcycles lived extremely hard lives. But not every motorcycle earns long-term value through aggression alone. Some become legends because they do everything exceptionally well. Reliability, comfort, engineering, and performance all wrapped into one impossibly balanced package. For collectors searching for that kind of reputation, the next answer came from Honda's legendary V4 lineage. Number 8. Honda VFR750. Some motorcycles become collectible because they were extreme. The Honda VFR750 earned its reputation in a completely different way. For decades, riders considered it almost too dependable, too practical, and too refined to ever become a serious collector machine. But today, that same reputation is precisely why values are climbing so quickly. During the 90s, the VFR developed a loyal following because it accomplished something very few motorcycles could achieve. It blended real sport bike performance with long-distance comfort and legendary reliability in one remarkably balanced package. At the center of the experience sat Honda's unforgettable V4 engine, famous for its smooth power delivery and the distinctive mechanical sound created by its gear-driven cams. Even now, experienced riders instantly recognize that unique rhythm. What truly transformed the VFR into a modern collectible, however, was durability. Owners trusted these motorcycles enough to ride them constantly. Many accumulated staggering mileage crossing states and entire countries without complaint. Ironically, that reliability reduced the number of preserved low-mileage examples available today. Between 2018 and 2020, excellent motorcycles could still be found between roughly $3,000 and $5,000. But by 2026, clean examples with factory paint, stock exhaust systems, and documented maintenance history regularly command between $7,000 and $12,000. And by now, one thing becoming impossible to ignore is how fast original motorcycles are disappearing. So tell us in the comments, which bike do you think collectors are still sleeping on right now? Sometimes values rise slowly for years, then suddenly explode on a geometric scale once clean examples become almost impossible to find. The VFR 750 built its reputation through refinement and everyday dependability, which is exactly why so many enthusiasts still regret selling theirs. But in the collector world, emotional attachment is only part of the equation. Racing heritage can change everything. And during the late 1990s, few names carried more weight on the street and the track than a certain lightweight superbike that helped define an entire generation of aggressive Japanese performance machines. That growing nostalgia drives us directly into the next bike on this list. Number 7. Suzuki GSXR 750. By the late 90s, the superbike world had become a brutal arms race. Every manufacturer wanted more horsepower, sharper handling, and faster lap times. But while many motorcycles chased performance, the Suzuki GSX 750 chased something even more dangerous: pure racing identity. And today, collectors are paying serious money to experience that feeling again. When Suzuki redesigned the GSXR 750, in 1996, the transformation was dramatic. The motorcycle became lighter, narrower, sharper, and far more aggressive than the generations before it. An aluminum frame, improved suspension, and razor-precise handling suddenly turned the GSXR into far more than a straight-line missile. This was now a true corner-attacking superbike built with unmistakable racing DNA. And riders immediately understood what Suzuki had created. Unlike modern sport bikes layered with electronics and rider aids, the GSXR delivered a completely mechanical experience. The carbureted engine responded instantly, the riding position demanded commitment, and the motorcycle rewarded confidence instead of correcting mistakes. When new, these machines typically sold between roughly $9,500 and $11,000. Years later, many examples drifted into the used market for less than $6,000 as newer fuel-injected motorcycles stole attention. But today, exceptionally clean survivors with factory bodywork and original paint are commanding dramatically higher prices as collectors race to secure untouched examples. But as values continue climbing, many buyers are becoming even more selective. Increasingly, attention is shifting toward motorcycles built with a stronger connection to homologation racing, machines that looked, felt, and sounded closer to true superbike competition. And once that conversation begins, it inevitably opens the door for the next motorcycle in this countdown. Number 6. Kawasaki ZX-7R. While some manufacturers chased comfort or headline horsepower numbers, Kawasaki pursued something far more serious with the ZX-7R, pure racing aggression. The moment riders saw the motorcycle, its purpose felt obvious. Massive twin headlights, oversized ram air intakes, and a brutally focused riding position gave the ZX-7R the presence of a machine built for the starting grid, rather than public streets. Beneath the bodywork sat a high-revving inline four paired with an incredibly stiff chassis that rewarded precision and punished hesitation. This was not a forgiving motorcycle. It demanded confidence from the rider and complete commitment entering corners. Yet that demanding character became exactly what enthusiasts fell in love with. The ZX-7R developed a reputation for exceptional front-end feel and razor-sharp handling, earning enormous respect among canyon riders and superbike fans alike. Even years later, many experienced riders still describe the motorcycle as one of the purest analog handling machines Kawasaki ever produced. During the late 2010s, clean motorcycles often traded between roughly $4,500 and $6,500 because many buyers considered them outdated supersport bikes. But by 2026, original low-mileage examples regularly command between $10,000 and $16,000, especially with factory paint and untouched bodywork. Collectors now inspect frame damage, suspension wear, gearbox condition, and missing factory components carefully because surviving original motorcycles have become increasingly scarce. But limited production, sport machines are only one side of the exploding 1990s collector market. Some motorcycles became valuable for a completely different reason. They were so outrageous, so overpowered, and so unlike anything else on the road that they created their own legend. And when conversations turn toward pure muscle bike insanity, the next machine towers over almost everything that came before it. Number 5. Yamaha V-Max. Some motorcycles earn respect through precision, others earn admiration through engineering sophistication. But the Yamaha V-Max became legendary for an entirely different reason: intimidation. Few motorcycles from the 90s delivered such outrageous acceleration with such unapologetic aggression, and decades later, collectors still cannot get enough of it. At the center of the V-Max sat a massive V4 engine paired with Yamaha's unforgettable V-Boost system. Under normal riding, the motorcycle already felt muscular. But once the revs climbed higher, the V-Boost system opened additional intake pathways and unleashed a violent surge of power that completely transformed the machine's personality. The sensation shocked riders then, and honestly, it still does today. The styling only amplified the experience. Large air scoops, a stretched stance, fat rear rubber, and brutally muscular proportions gave the V-Max a presence that looked more like a street-legal drag bike than a traditional cruiser. When new, most V-Max models carried prices between roughly $9,000 and $11,000. Years later, used examples remain surprisingly attainable, often selling between $4,000 and $7,000, as owners treated them like everyday muscle machines instead of future collectibles. Today, that perception has changed dramatically. Exceptionally clean motorcycles with original exhaust systems, factory paint, and untouched V-Boost components are becoming increasingly scarce. As collector demand continues rising sharply, the V-Max proved that brute force and unforgettable character can keep a motorcycle valuable for decades. But while muscle cruisers built their reputations through intimidation, the late 1990s introduced a new obsession entirely: motorcycles that rewrote the rules of speed, weight, and handling all at once. Suddenly, collectors were no longer just hunting for torque monsters. They were searching for the machines that changed superbike history overnight. And no motorcycle shocked the industry faster than the next entry in this countdown. Number 4. Yamaha YZFR1. By the end of the 90s, superbikes were already becoming brutally fast, but they still carried a certain heaviness, physically, mechanically, even emotionally. Then Yamaha introduced the YZFR1, and almost overnight, the entire superbike world changed direction. When the first generation R1 arrived in 1998, riders could barely believe what Yamaha had accomplished. The motorcycle delivered nearly 1,000 cubic centimeters of explosive power inside a chassis that felt dramatically smaller and lighter than rival leader bikes. A compact engine layout, stacked gearbox design, and aggressive geometry gave the R1 an intensity that felt almost dangerous compared with anything else on the road. And that danger became part of the legend. The R1 did not feel sanitized or forgiving. The throttle response was immediate. The front wheel constantly wanted to rise, and the motorcycle demanded real respect from the rider. For an entire generation growing up during the late 90s and early 2000s, this became the dream machine hanging on bedroom walls and magazine covers everywhere. When new, most models sold between roughly $10,000 and $11,500. Years later, used prices often drifted below $7,000 as owners modified, raced, and heavily abused them. Today, surviving original motorcycles with factory bodywork, stock exhaust systems, and low mileage are commanding enormous collector attention as clean first-generation R1s become increasingly difficult to locate. And the motorcycle waiting next may be even more iconic, because few machines from the 90s combined beauty, racing dominance, and mechanical passion quite like it. Number 3. Ducati 916. The Ducati 916 achieved something far rarer. It became a motorcycle people admired almost like fine art. When the 916 arrived during the middle of the 90s, it completely transformed the superbike world. Designed by Massimo Tamburini, the motorcycle looked impossibly exotic for a production machine. The razor-sharp bodywork, under-seat exhausts, single-sided swing arm, and aggressive stance created a silhouette that instantly separated the Ducati from everything around it. Even parked motionless, the motorcycle felt alive. But the experience became even more unforgettable once the engine started. Its liquid-cooled Desmo V-twin delivered brutal mid-range torque and a raw mechanical pulse that gave the motorcycle an emotional personality many riders still describe decades later. Combined with Ducati's dominance in world superbike competition, the 916 quickly evolved from a performance machine into a global icon. Yet surprisingly, values remained relatively approachable for years. During the late 2010s, many clean examples still traded between roughly $8,000 and $12,000 as collectors focused more heavily on rare homologation specials. That window has almost disappeared. By 2026, original low-mileage motorcycles regularly command between $18,000 and $30,000, while rare variants climb dramatically higher at collector auctions. Enthusiasts now search obsessively for factory fairings, stock exhaust systems, documented maintenance records, and untouched bodywork because originality has become critical. The first-generation R1 changed the superbike world so dramatically that clean examples now disappear from the market almost as quickly as they appear. But revolutionary performance alone does not always create the strongest collector obsession. Sometimes value rises because a motorcycle becomes something larger than engineering. A machine so visually iconic that it starts being treated more like art than transportation. And in the 1990s, one Italian superbike achieved exactly that status, leading us directly to the next motorcycle on this list. Number 2, Honda RC45. Some motorcycles become valuable because they are fast. Others become collectible because they are rare. But the Honda RC45 occupies an entirely different category because this motorcycle was never truly designed for ordinary roads in the first place. It was engineered for one purpose above all else: domination. Officially known as the RVF750R, the RC45 represented the absolute peak of Honda's racing obsession during the 90s. Nearly every component reflected that mission: titanium connecting rods, gear-driven cams, advanced fuel injection, a single-sided swing arm, and an astonishingly sophisticated chassis made the motorcycle feel closer to a factory superbike than a production street machine. And that exclusivity came with an enormous price. When new, the RC45 carried prices between roughly $27,000 and $32,000, an almost unbelievable figure during the 90s. Most riders simply could not justify spending that kind of money on a motorcycle, which meant production remained extremely limited from the beginning. Ironically, that rarity is exactly why collectors are now fighting to own them. Years ago, clean examples already commanded serious money, often selling above $40,000. But today, exceptionally original motorcycles with factory bodywork, Untouched magnesium components and complete documentation are reaching astonishing collector prices as surviving stock examples become almost impossible to locate. Are you enjoying this ride through the motorcycles riders wish they had never let go? Then hit that like button. And if you want to support the channel even more while getting early access to the newest videos, become a member. Because some of the motorcycles we're tracking are appreciating faster than many riders think possible. The RC45 sits in a world few motorcycles ever reach, rare, exotic, and financially out of reach for most riders, long before values exploded. But the most fascinating appreciation stories are not always the rarest machines. Sometimes the biggest surprises come from motorcycles that once felt ordinary enough to actually ride, modify, and park in everyday garages. And that is precisely why the next motorcycle became the perfect symbol of this entire countdown. A superbike that thousands of riders once overlooked before the market suddenly realized what it had become. Number 1, Honda CBR 900RR FireBlade. At the very top of this countdown sits the motorcycle that completely rewrote the rules of the superbike world, the Honda CBR 900RR FireBlade. More than speed, more than horsepower, more than reputation. This machine changed the entire philosophy of performance motorcycling, and decades later, collectors are paying enormous money to own a surviving piece of that revolution. Before the FireBlade appeared, manufacturers believed superbikes needed larger engines, heavier frames, and brutal straight-line power. Then Honda engineer Tadao Baba introduced a radically different idea. Instead of simply adding horsepower, Honda focused on reducing weight, sharpening agility, and creating a motorcycle that felt almost impossibly responsive. The results stunned the industry. The original FireBlade delivered near-liter bike acceleration inside a chassis that felt dramatically lighter and smaller than its rivals. The throttle response felt immediate, the handling almost telepathic, and the entire motorcycle carried a raw intensity that modern electronics can never truly recreate. When new FireBlades from the 90s typically sold between roughly $8,500 and $11,000. Years later, clean used motorcycles could still be purchased for less than $6,000, which is exactly why so many were modified, raced, crashed, or transformed beyond recognition. Today, surviving original examples with factory fairings, untouched frames, and complete documentation are commanding astonishing collector prices as enthusiasts scramble to secure authentic motorcycles before they disappear forever. Because collectors are no longer chasing old sport bikes anymore. They are chasing the machine that changed everything. And if this video made you realize yesterday's used motorcycle could become tomorrow's collector jackpot, the next video is going even deeper into the machines riders are scrambling to buy before prices climb out of reach. Click the next video to continue the road trip. Join our tribe by subscribing. And if you want to support the channel and unlock early access to upcoming videos, become a member. And don't forget to like this video.